Beth and Dr. Mari, thanks for joining me today. Beth, we've been reading for the past couple of years, and I think that we've made a lot of progress. Let me give a little bit of background, and then I'll let you jump in and let Dr. Mari jump in. I think that the situation warrants a podcast. Beth came for a reading from me a couple of years ago. It was on the phone, and she was asking me about her recent separation with her husband. Come to find out, as I started to look into what was going on, I saw another woman in the cards. And that was really emotionally devastating for you. When I was on the phone with Beth, she got in the car and went over to her husband's house, and she proceeded to describe the girl the way that I had described her, and he was in utter shock. Unfortunately, this did ensue in a divorce. But during that time, both of you realized about a year in that you really didn't want a divorce, that you wanted to be together. And I know that you have 4 kids, and part of the situation was he felt that all of your time was being put into the kids, which, having 4 kids, I can understand that. And as a mother, the most important thing is your children, are your children. And Mari, you're a mother too, and I think you understand that too. And his need was, it appeared to be all about him. And I think that you especially felt a stab to the heart, Beth, because your husband went outside the marriage instead of talking to you about what you needed. You were never able to really talk about that because both of you were on opposite ends of the spectrum. So fast forward now, 2019, and you have gotten to the point where you've recognized a lot of the healing and the things that you needed to do to be a better wife and partner to him. And I believe that he thinks that he has also done a lot of the work, maybe not as much as you have wanted him to do. But now that we are at this, I'm going to call it the finish line, because you have discussed getting back together and reconciling. Now, Dr. Murray, a little bit of history is lately they've been spending a lot more time together, great time together, actually, a lot more conversations that are open and vulnerable, but it's all been centered around the kids. So here we are. And last week, Beth told me that he dropped a bomb on her because he thought maybe this wasn't going to work. So do you want to fill in a couple of the blanks there for me, Beth?
Yes, absolutely. And thank you so much for having me. So we've been spending a lot of time together, and Tim's been very awkward and quiet and reserved. And for such a long time, I think he felt like he was the outsider looking in because I was focused on the family, focused on taking care of the 4 kids. He wasn't getting a lot of love and attention that he needed. And he wanted to have a friendship, but there was a lot of work that needed to be done before we could reach that point. So now that we're on the same page with parenting, we're able to make decisions together, we're able to sit down and have family dinners with our 4 children, he is getting to a place where I think he's a little nervous maybe about where we're headed, and he's unsure and he's pulled back. As much as we've both agreed and communicated to one another that we don't feel like we should be divorced, we are. And we've both admitted to one another that we do love each other. And if there's any way we could make this work, we would like that opportunity. And I am prepared to move forward with him, and he's not. Now he's pulling back a little bit.
So, Dr. Mari, the love is there. And through the readings that I have given Beth, I can see that they will get back together. And we actually wanted to call on your professional advice and ask you, how do you get this couple from point C to point A? Because in between there is this B, station B. So you have C, B, and A. And they are having a hard time getting to point B because I think that they can both see that they want to be at the ultimate end goal, and that would be to be back together. And yet they are at point C where there is still some, I would say, doubt. And they also feel like there might be a little bit of trust. And maybe even trust him. I think that Tim feels like maybe he can't trust himself. So anyway, I'm going to ask you for your professional advice here.
So, a couple questions. One is, I know this might seem philosophical, but what does divorce mean for you guys? How do you guys play that out right now in the relationship?
The interesting thing is Tim will not use the word divorce. He never describes our time apart or separation as divorce. And he's had a really hard time calling it that. So, really, we're just two people who love each other, who are raising a family and living apart. And we have our own lives and our own goals and paths. Does that answer your question?
Yes. So are you guys exclusively together? Or either one of you with anyone else?
No, it's my understanding that we're both single. And while we both want and desire to be in a loving relationship, neither one of us really feels good about the experience that we've had with other people since we have not been together. So we're both single.
Single but together.
Correct.
Okay. I guess where I'm going with that is I think you guys are doing the relationship now. And so the fear is, are we going to do something different if we make the commitment to be together? So I think where Jocelyn was talking about trust, it might be that he doesn't trust himself. That could be it. It might be that you don't trust yourself. Like, I can continue down this particular path. It could be that we don't trust that the relationship is not going to move it back into a kids only and we're friends, we're roommates type of relationship. But the facts are that you are doing that now. You're able to maintain a good relationship with each other and the kids today. So the work has already been done. And the conversation might be about pointing out that we are already there. There's not a place to go besides you living in the same house.
Okay, that makes sense.
Okay, but wait, I'm lost because to me, I feel like there's a disconnect here. I feel like Beth has been doing Beth. She has maintained the home. She's maintained the four kids. Yes, he sees them. Yes, it's gotten better. Yes, I think that he has done a lot of work. I think that he had a dark night of the soul, and he started to also realize that he was very selfish. And I think that there still is a bit of that going on. I know that they both dated, and I am feeling like maybe there's a disconnect in their communication. I think that she wants to see them get back together. I think that she definitely feels like, oh God, there could be a little bit of what if we get back into this and it winds up being the same thing and we're disappointed and he's, bitching at me about the kids and, the kids are my number one priority. And he's feeling, okay, wait a second, if we get back together and what if it's the same old thing? What if because a lot of it is that he had a lot of sexual demands on her. He felt like he had needs that he wanted met and she was taking that time away from him. Now, I'll tell you, as a woman and a mother, and I have watched Beth grow, and it has nothing to do with him. I've watched her grow. She's become independent financially. She's become her own woman. She expresses herself differently. She has made vision boards. She's got stickies all over the place, and she is focused on being the best version of Beth that she can be, and that being Beth and mother. And so she hasn't focused on wife. And I think to give that part of herself up again is part of the glitch that she feels because she doesn't want to have to cook dinner for him every night. She's different now. She's for 2 years, she's been doing it differently. And I think that that's where their disconnect is. They're not living together. How often do you see him every week, Beth?
I probably see him twice a month. And it wasn't until this past weekend that we actually had one on one time and saw each other without the kids.
So, really, you're just in the very infancy of talking about getting back together. Do you see what I'm saying, Dr. Mari?
Yes.
So, what I'm feeling is I feel like there's this big chasm still between the two of them. And I think her fear is why all of a sudden did he drop the bomb and say, well, I don't know. And probably you're going to tell me because he probably doesn't know. Right. Okay. So, all right, I'll give you that. And I think for her, that communicates to, hey, wait a second. Do you really not know? Or am I not enough for you? And are we going to do a repeat of the same? Am I wasting my time? Should I go out and date other people? I think that those are all of the things that we've discussed before, right, Beth?
Yeah, that's right. I'm at this point where, Tim always says, I'm living in the present. I'm living in the now. I'm only giving energy to things and people that I want to. All of that's great and well. And I agree that that is exactly what we should do as human beings. That's great. But the disconnect for me is, okay, if you're living in the now and in the present, then don't make a comment that says, well, we keep having this conversation of getting back together and it's not going anywhere. And then I lay my cards out on the table and say, okay, it's very crystal clear and simple for me. I'd be willing to work this out with you, date you again, and see where this goes. And then he pulls back and says, but I'm really unsure. It's very contradictory and it sends mixed signals and it makes me want to just pull away.
And see, I don't see it as contradictory. Because what I hear is him saying, what I hear, okay, and I could be completely wrong because I am not psychic. I just look at what the behaviors are, right? So you said, we will date and see where it goes, right? Something that's to that effect.
Yes.
What I could imagine he heard was, I have to win her back. Like, I have to do something to earn this, right? So what if she decides after I let down my guard and I'm fully present with her, like he says, I'm here and now with her, and she says no, she crushes my heart, right? So I'm not saying you're saying anything wrong. I'm just saying that he might be getting the mixed message as well that says, you're not sure about this because you're saying let's wait and see, which nobody can be sure about anything. You could be sure about him and he fall off the face of the earth tomorrow. Literally, like die, so nobody can guarantee that this is going to go another day or another 10 years. But he's looking for that. That's what I think he's looking for, is that if he opens up himself, you're going to accept him, period. Is that wise? I don't know.
Psychically, what I pick up is Beth immediately goes to ding, ding, red light goes on. Is he seeing somebody else?
Right.
Is he not sure of us? And the question for you, for me, is if a woman is feeling, because I picked that up right away, the first thing I can tell you, she thinks this mouse, starts rolling around on that wheel in her head. And she's thinking, is there somebody else? Am I not enough? Is he stringing me along? Because we've taken this much time, has he met somebody? Is that why he's unsure? Because he was pretty damn sure 3 or 4 months ago. He was all in emotionally. So what's happened between now and then? And I agree with you, Dr. Mari. He could be saying exactly what you're saying. But how do we help Beth with the mouse and the wheel in her head? And how does she ascertain from him, is that true? Does she just have to wait it out? And I think that she doesn't want to wait it out. She'd like to kind of come at that with a sword and say, listen up. If you got somebody else, I'm going to chop this tree down right now at its root. I'm not going to waste any more time with you if it's between me and another woman, because there's no such thing as another woman for her in their relationship. End of story. So how does she get where she needs to be?
So, I think one thing you said earlier was that she's a new Beth, right? And I want that Beth to be here all the time. That Beth hasn't pushed this guy away. He's still here with the new Beth. So what does she tell herself? Does she need an answer to that question? And if she does, that's her barrier to saying, I accept you fully. And it's also his barrier for jumping in because she's not sure. So it's like this unspoken barrier because she's not sure and he's not sure she's sure. So nobody does anything. So does that make sense? So what I would say is that, Beth, you would have to have that conversation with him if those are your concerns. Tim, I feel that you've pulled back. Is there someone else? Now, I don't believe there's someone else, but that is one thing that rolls through my mind when you pull back, right? And he'd be like, oh, no. I thought you were pulling back. That's why I pulled back. So a lot of times what happens is we have these conversations in our head and we never have with the person we need to have it with. And so we have this covert operation going on trying to figure out what's happening. And I say, make the covert overt. Bring it in the room. Let's talk about it. Because what you're asking from him is open communication. Then that means you have to practice open communication.
So you think it would be wise of me to have this conversation with him about pulling back.
Yeah, I'm not psychic, but I'm just saying that if we are saying we're going to live our relationship in an open manner, right? We can talk about anything. Even if he said to you, "Hey, I did find somebody attractive and I got scared." Right? I got scared that I wasn't going to be able to be faithful. I want him to be able to have that conversation with you, because then it loses its power. That attraction loses its power.
Because it's fear. Beth, that's exactly what happens when Tim and you do not have a conversation and you don't have clarification. In sneaks the enemy, and the enemy is fear. And the fear is, oh my God, what if he's going to do it again? What if he's finding another woman attractive? Because what we have to interpret is the cheating. What did you feel when he was cheating? Right? And you also have to ask yourself, are you willing to become vulnerable enough? Right? This is what we do when we're in a relationship. We give the other person power to hurt us by being vulnerable and loving them. And I think that that's why you guys are on each side of this line. You see what I mean? So maybe Dr. Mari can help you with this. My question to you, Beth, is what did it feel like for you? How did you interpret Tim cheating on you? What are the words that you would use?
I felt hurt, betrayed, angry. I didn't feel like I was enough. I questioned everything about my existence. I constantly would wake up and try to figure out what I could have done differently, what I could have done better. There were a lot of whys, a lot of questions, and I went into a really dark place. It made me feel, like I wasn't beautiful, like I wasn't enough, like I wasn't smart enough, funny enough, a lot of negative emotions.
What does it mean when you say that you questioned your very existence?
Because whenever I was in my marriage, I didn't really have my own identity. I found happiness through being Tim's wife and through being a mother to the 4 kids. I had goals and ideals, but it wasn't something that I put energy into. So once that marriage was stripped away and I had to take a look at myself in the mirror and figure out who I am, who I want to be, and how I'm going to exist without Tim, because my history has been that of a love addict, of someone who just jumps in one relationship after another. So I've never truly been by myself for more than 3 to 6 months.
So, Dr. Mari, now that she has been out of this for 2 years, she's definitely fully empowered in who she is. And I think that I want to ask this question, and it's probably in its most negative form. But do you think a couple like this can actually get back together? And I already can hear your voice echoing my head. It's like, of course they can. People can do whatever they want to do if they're committed to it. But for her, I guess my better question would be, if you were going to give Beth and Tim any advice on these very beginning stages, I see this line drawn in the sand, and she's on one side and he's on the other, and they're both facing each other, and I know that they love each other and they want to get back together. I know that they do. In their heads, this could be a very beautiful thing, and both of them are also questioning, but what about reality? What happens in the real world when we move back in the house and we've got 4 kids and it's absolute chaos, and I'm doing my job, earning my own money, and I am involved in my church, and I'm seeing my friends, and he's off doing extreme sports because that's what he does. And they come back together and they're both mentally someplace else. How do these two people even begin when they're facing each other at this line and they're saying, but can this be real?
So the first question you asked, you answered, can this work? Absolutely. So yeah, they can definitely work this relationship out. That's not even an issue. But just as intentional as both people have been, they have to continue that intensity or intentionality. And that's what people tend to not do. They get very complacent. Oh, he's back. Oh, she's back. We're good now. I don't have to do all these things I was doing. And the reality is that's exactly false. You have to continue to do all of the things you've been doing. So where Beth has a life of her own and she does her own thing. She has to do that. And he does his extreme sports and he has to do that. And in the in-between is this coming together, right? So what people tend to do is they try to put both of their lives on top of each other and meld into one another. And I don't see that's a good marriage. A good marriage is a collaboration. We collaborate on things. I come in, you come in. I go out, you go out. Sometimes I give 60% and you give 40. Sometimes it's 70 and 25, 75 and 25, but it always equals 100. And so just depending on what the situation is, the time of the year, all those things, that will determine what the ebb and flow is in the relationship. So we basically give each other room to be ourselves, and then there's a coming together, which is what they're doing right now. And that's why I'm saying they have the skill set. They're doing it now. They just take that same model and apply it inside of the relationship.
And part of that, Beth, would be to have an open and honest conversation with Tim when the time is right. And you know when the time is right. A lot of people want to jump right in and get on the phone and say, I just have one question for you. Is there anybody else? And that isn't really the way you guys have been handling this so beautifully.
Right.
I think that what Dr. Mari is saying to you is when you are together and you have that alone time, you can say to him, I just want you to know there isn't anybody else in my life right now. And I need to know from you that you don't have anybody else, or do you have somebody else, or however that's going to come out for you.
Right.
You know, I don't want to put words in your mouth. Dr. Mari's not going to put words in your mouth. She's just going to guide you.
It's adding to the model, right? So you already have a model, and it sounds like you guys have already had some pretty open, honest conversations.
Yes, we have.
Right? So we keep doing that. And so even if you guys move into the same house tomorrow, we don't stop having open, honest conversations. When the time comes up, when the time is right, whatever it is, we still do it. And so what I recommend, especially when an infraction like this has occurred, I recommend that you guys set a time every month where you two go away and you have an open conversation about the state of where things are. Whether it be him saying, hey, you know, when we first got back together, you really were all about me. And it just feels like, you know, because Laura's having a problem over here, I'm getting neglected, right? And you have to hear that and listen to that and say, okay, well, that wasn't my intent. You know, how do we fix it? So this open conversation is not just about this moment where you're feeling like, okay, what's up? It's about making sure these moments happen all the time, where we're always gauging the pressure and the temperature of the relationship.
Mari, so I'd like to know, when Tim moves back in, how do I address the emotions that I have whenever an idea pops up where he's cheated on me, or if he's on his phone and if he's being secretive, or he's going to get back into the state of being demanding about having sex and he doesn't feel like he's getting what he needs from me? So we've already talked about how we would both do our best to leave the past in the past if we did get back together. But I still have thoughts of how he made me feel whenever he did cheat on me. And I think about the different things that he did. What if that happens again? How should I handle it?
Okay, so my answer is probably not going to be popular because it sounds like blaming the victim, and it's not. But that's your personal work, right? That's the work that you have to do outside of Tim. That says, how do you take ownership of this? Because when I say I wasn't good enough, I'm owning his affair. And so I need to figure out, why do I own other people's stuff, regardless of what the stuff is, right? So that's your own personal therapy. Now, as far as addressing it inside the relationship, again, we should be able to have open conversation anytime, but it comes from not blaming him, but it's saying, hey, I was triggered today into a thought because there's a behavior that you did that reminded me of a really bad time for us. He can say, okay, well, what did I do? Because half the time he's not going to know. He's going to be like, okay, you're saying he's secretive on his phone and he's just on his phone. So accusing him of being secretive is not necessarily fair in that instance, because he may not be doing that at all, or he may not be aware of the way he's behaving. And so if we're in a good relationship, he would say to you, okay, tell me about the trigger. Help me understand what I did. And then he explains to you what his behaviors truly were. And we never connect these to the affair.
I like your language, though, Beth. She was very specific that you had to take responsibility for something that triggered you. Where I'm not clear, Dr. Mari, is you said, okay, wait a second. That's, you said don't blame the victim, but I'm a little lost because it's almost like I hear you saying, well, Beth, that's about you. I mean, if you're going back in the past in your head and you're saying, I'm not good enough, that's on you. What did you mean by that?
Well, because usually a trigger is to an event past the event that we're talking about. So the I'm not good enough probably occurred before you met Tim. He just reinforced it. So that's why I'm like, this is about you and what you're having internally. There are women that have had this happen to them and they know it's not about them. It's like, oh, he was just an asshole. That was just what he did, right? They don't internalize any of that because they don't have that frame of reference to do that. So there's somewhere in your past that I wasn't good enough. You treated me like crap. He just reinforced it. So that's where it becomes your issue to deal with and to explain to him what your trigger is so that he doesn't do anything to trigger you, but it's not his issue.
Okay, so it's my responsibility. Yeah, it makes sense to me. It's my responsibility to own that and to address it, but not place blame for something that has already happened, I guess.
Exactly. So it's basically that's something you have to heal and he can't hurt. So it's like he has to do things that doesn't hurt your healing, but it's your job to heal it.
Right.
So if he's doing something that's triggering you, absolutely, this is what we talk about. You're triggering me. When I see this, this is what I think, because you're still on your journey to healing that. But it's just not his job to heal that. So he doesn't walk around saying, I can't do this, I can't do that, because that triggers her. That's not fair in the relationship, because then he's going to be not himself.
Mm-hmm.
That makes sense. So then he can say to her, I understand that that's something that triggers you. He can try to maybe change his behavior. I don't know if that's even right. He could change his behavior by just being aware that something triggers her.
Exactly.
Yes, but I also see that her saying this triggers me owns the thoughts that you're having, the behaviors that you're having subconsciously. It's not even a conscious thing. It's just a trigger, and that's what a reaction is.
Right.
Right. And so we react and we act out. And then next thing you know, we're crazy and we've ruined the relationship and put the person in a prison.
Exactly. And so that I'll use myself as an example. I have a friend that sometimes does not answer my text. And that's one thing that just drives me insane because I'm very conscientious about my friendships, right? So if someone texts me, even if it's all day and I've been busy, I always return a text by the end of the day. And if I don't, I'm apologetic the next morning. Like, oh my God, I'm so sorry I missed your text, right? Well, this person doesn't do any of that. It's very disregarding to me. So I feel disregarded, right? That's not that person's issue. That's my issue. My job is to tell this person, hey, when you do this, this is how I feel, right? His response was, I didn't know that. I was just sick and I don't answer the phone when I'm sick, So it had nothing to do with the state of our relationship whatsoever. But it felt like that to me because I have a past of being disregarded. So this person's job is not necessarily there to change his behaviors. It's to explain his behavior so that I know where I stand in this.
That makes a lot of sense. When you really think about that, right, Beth, and you assimilate that and digest that and you own that, you realize, oh, it makes us stop before we react. And it makes us think. And if we can get into those habits, those positive, good habits of thinking instead of reacting, people definitely wouldn't call Mari and I as much.
And it also builds intimacy because I get to know you and I let you be you. Like I let you be you. This is who you are. I don't take that personal anymore.
I like that.
So when I'm hurt by what somebody does, it's because I'm taking personal what you do. Even though it might have nothing to do with me whatsoever. It's just how you perform in the world. So this person also knows that I had that issue. So when they do it, they will apologize, say, hey, I know you hate that. I'm sorry, right? So they're aware they didn't change the behavior. They just apologize because they know that I have an issue with it. And then that builds trust. That builds trust for me with that person, right? So now our relationship is even more intimate because you can be you, I can be me. You're aware of my issues. I'm aware of how you perform.
So I have another question. We have 4 kids, and my rules, parenting together under one roof was very different than the way we parent now. It's very much my house, my rules. I haven't had any discipline issues. We have a really happy home. The energy is just really good. The other thing that gives me pause about moving him back into the home is disrupting our family flow. So, what would be the best way to integrate Tim back into our home and then the kids? Because they're teenagers. Now, granted, most of them are on their way out the door. They still live in my house and they come home during holidays and summers. And it's a very comfortable, happy place. But he has this energy about him that tends to make people not feel so warm or welcome.
Do they describe that currently with him, that they don't feel welcome and it's not warm?
Yes, they still do.
Okay. So, that's definitely some family work that needs to happen, right? But there's something that you said that triggers me, right? So linguistics, how you talk is really important. And so what I heard you say was when we move him back into the home, as though he's an outsider. So I think he will feel that. And that might be some of, it probably wasn't what happened originally because he had all these other things going on, but it definitely would cause him to not behave well in the present. If I feel like I am coming into you all's space, it's us and us against him type of thing. And so before we did that, I'd have literally this, to me, most of the issues in relationships and families is a lack of communication. We just don't talk and we don't have very candid conversations. We dance around issues. So I would have literally a family meeting with everybody involved saying, how are we going to integrate our family? That puts everybody in the responsible category for their part versus him having to come in and perform well or everyone judging how he's performing.
That takes a lot of pressure off of everybody because everybody's taking responsibility and they're not looking at Tim and they're not saying, how are you going to perform? Because what we focus on, we get. And so if everybody's focused on his energy and it being uptight, it's going to make him uptight because everything is energy. You're communicating with each other all the time. Words or no words, right? It's all energy. You can feel it. And so if everybody sits down and they are aware of it, we bring it up into our conscious minds and we address the fact that we are actually solidifying it by thinking it and saying it, he'll actually relax. And so will you all.
And Jocelyn, you always say we're co-creators. And so that's kind of the thought process there is that we're going to co-create what this is going to look like. It's not him coming in and following a set of rules that we've established for him. And then he can have some ownership and everybody else has ownership and we're all creating together, which makes it, like Jocelyn said, a lot more relaxed and we can all be what we need to be for one another. And he might, he has a high-tech job, I heard. And so we don't know what his work environment truly looks like, right? Most of them are pompous, they're egotistical, they're very driven by competition and who's first and who's last and all those things. And he might bring that energy home. And then when he comes into an environment where there's some of that going on too, he stays in that character.
That's very true.
But if we speak to it and say, hey, you're coming home, you're bringing your work person home, and we don't like that work person because we don't work where you work at. We didn't sign up for that job. Then he can become aware that at the door, he needs to, take his shoes off first or take his tie off first so that he can get into dad character, So, but if I'm not aware that that's what I'm doing to someone, then I can't change it. So that's why we have to have conversations around it.
The other thing I picked up while you were both talking was I felt that Tim is a guy that needs a lot of attention. It's all about him. Even in his job, it's all about him. And adoration and attention and validation are really important. Beth said that she had dedicated her whole life to relationships because she didn't feel like she was enough. And she was never really without one. And so now you have this woman who has changed and is empowered. And I think the question mark is that something that he has worked on as well, right? And he can say he has, and he can tell you whatever. What the point that I'm trying to make is I believe in the co-creation, just like Dr. Mari said. And I think that you can begin to see him like that, where he is your equal and he will become your equal. Instead of seeing him as broken, see him as whole, right? I mean, you can use your prayer, you can use your thought, you can use your intention, whatever it is that you do. You need to begin to see that person as you want them to be, not as who they used to be. You treat them that way, you speak to them that way, and the energy and the vibration begins to change. They can't exist in just, it's all about me, 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 when you are seeing him as part of the whole, when you are seeing him participating as, like Dr. Mari said, 60, 40, 75, 25, whatever it may be. It's always going to fluctuate. Your energy has changed so much that I think you're afraid of going backward. And I think that his energy has also changed so much that he's actually afraid of going forward because it's so good right now. I think you guys are afraid of that. And I think instead you have to pull that together and become one, not two separate people, but the relationship is a combination of Beth and Tim. That's the oneness. See what I mean?
Yes.
And then, just believing, Beth, that you truly are enough, because this new woman that you are, or the woman that you just uncovered, or whatever that is, he's still here. Why would he turn away now? He knows exactly who you are right now, and he's still here. Are there going to be bumps in the road? Yeah, that's called relationships. It's called being alive, but he's still here with all the changes you've made. So once you believe that, he already believes it. He sees it. He's still here. Absolutely. And if he didn't want it, he'd run right away from it. If he wanted a weak vessel, he would find one. He wouldn't even be attracted to you. He wouldn't want any of this. And so I think even, this again is not victim blaming, but there's a book called The Self-Centered Marriage. And it's such a fabulous book because it talks about centering yourself in the marriage versus having the other person center you. Because when the other person centers you, you need them all the time to do that. When you center yourself, you can be a complete partner because you're not needy for the other person, whatever that neediness is, right? So he might have needed a strong woman, right? Let's just say. And when he didn't see that in you, because you were so consumed with him, right? He's like, okay, but I still need it. So I go out and I find the woman who makes it difficult for me a little bit. That's him not centering himself. He's finding someone else to center him, basically. And so again, it's not victim blaming. It's just that it's an energy thing at the end of the day. And so your energy now is strong and standing up for yourself and taking care of yourself. And he is deeply attracted to that because that's why he's here. But that also has to make him center himself.
Okay.
And then you don't worry about affairs anymore because he's too busy centering himself, not seeking someone else to do that.
That actually creates a very healthy relationship when two people are focused on themselves, not the other. And then they come together with their own personal power to create something even better because there's no need. There's an independence and yet an interdependence, which is different from dependence and in just straight independence. So it's an interdependence. And there with that is a tremendous respect for the other person. And usually when somebody respects their spouse tremendously, they're not cheating on them. They wouldn't think about doing that because of the respect. They know what they would lose. And that's the beauty of becoming empowered like you've become empowered, Beth. And if it doesn't work, you can part peaceably. You can kick them out of your house. You can do whatever you want to do, but you still know who you are. And to be vulnerable and give this a chance is actually just as empowering because you can step up to the plate and say, I did it. I chose it and it worked. Or I chose it, that didn't work so well, right? But the bottom line is you'll walk away and you'll say, I tried. I wasn't afraid.
Right.
And that's also another step in this is not having fear. You have to face the fact that you're afraid to be vulnerable because you don't want to experience disappointment. But like Dr. Mari said, you don't know what this life is going to hold. So you step up to the plate and you say, I'm going to give it a chance. I'm going to do it because I really want it. And so you give something that, to thrive. You teach your kids something, you contribute back to the world. No matter which way it goes, you've done something positive. Beth and Dr. Mari, thank you so much. I really appreciated it. It was a great podcast. I hope you guys get something out of it. Have a nice one. Bye.